Well, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today, especially the Darkinjung speaking people of the Central Coast Council area and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. I extend my respects to elders past and present and to all future cultural knowledge holders. This meeting has been recorded and webcast, and you are encouraged to bear this in mind when choosing what to say. There is to be no other recording or filming of this meeting unless the prior permission of the panel has been obtained. The panel's decisions from this meeting and the audio recording should be available on Council's website ordinarily well within 7 days of the meeting. Could I ask everyone please to turn your electronic devices to silent and to ensure that you're free from any interruptions. So just to introduce the panel today, there's myself, Cara Crayson, I'm the chair, Grant Christmas, who's an expert professional panel member, Greg Flynn, who's also an expert professional panel member, and Tony Tuxworth, who's the nominated community panel member. There are no apologies for today's meeting. I'm just checking, conflicts of interest. I'm just noticing it's not in the notes, but I'd just like to advise everyone that the panel has submitted conflict of interest forms ahead of this meeting in relation to the 3 items that are in this public meeting, and no conflicts of interest have been recorded in relation to these 3 items. Just moving on to the development application. So today the meeting will consider the following development applications in this public meeting. There's item 3.1, which is for 16 Warra Street, Edlong Beach, multi-dwelling housing. Item 3.2 for 78 Bluebell Drive, Wamberal, for alterations and additions to an existing dwelling house. And item 3.3 at 34 Warra Street at Long Beach for multi-dwelling housing. So the panel has been provided with assessment reports prepared by council staff, as well as public submissions on the applications. Site orientation and briefings have been undertaken, and council staff have also briefed the panel on the key issues the applications raise. Today we have the following 7 people registered to address the panel. So for agenda item 3.1, which is 16 Warra Street at Long Beach, we have 1 speaker, Greg Smith from KM Design Partners on behalf of the applicant. For agenda item 3.2, which is 78 Bluebell Drive, Wamberal, alterations and additions, we have 2 speakers. We have Deborah Bell against the recommendation and Scott Soller also against the recommendation. For agenda item 3.3, we have for 34 Warra Street at Long Beach, I have registered 4 speakers. So the first is Debbie Sanatha for the recommendation, Francis Whiffen for the recommendation. The third speaker is Alana Jones on behalf of the applicant, and Greg Smith from KM Design Partners also on behalf of the applicant. So welcome everyone. We will hear from the speakers on the first agenda item, then we will hear from the applicant's representative or representatives and so on. Our usual practice is to allow individual members of the public 3 minutes to speak on the matter. This time may be extended with the agreement of the panel. Once members of the public have spoken, the applicant will be given a maximum speaking time of 15 minutes to respond should they wish to. As the panel has been provided with copies of all the submissions received in response to the DAs, there is no need to repeat the points made in those submissions. I also ask that each speaker be heard in silence while they are addressing the panel and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout this meeting. There is to be no personal criticism directed at any speaker or council staff. Any such criticism would be contrary to the panel's code of conduct and will not be accepted. Such criticism also adds nothing to the process of considering the matters at hand. Panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said. Your privacy is important to us, and you are under no obligation to disclose your personal information or provide your address in a public forum. However, should you wish to provide information in relation to your locality to assist the panel in understanding your concerns, that is entirely up to you. The panel has had the benefit of copies of unredacted submissions, and we will therefore refer to relevant information provided where available and possible. After hearing from the speakers, the panel may ask questions of council officers to clarify matters raised. And then after hearing from the speakers on each agenda item, the panel will adjourn the meeting to confer. If we were meeting in person, we might then reconvene the meeting to hand down our decisions. But given this is an electronic meeting, we will instead seek to have the panel's decisions up on council's website as soon as possible. At the conclusion of the adjournment, we may decide to either make a decision on the matter, or if more information is required by the panel, the decision may be deferred either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. Agenda item 1.1. Oh, my apologies. This is where the declarations of interest is. So I'd remind panel members of the requirements of the Code of Conduct for panel members about conflict of interest declarations. And I just call again, does any member of the panel have a declaration of interest which has not previously been made? And that's declarations of interest in relation to the 3 items in the public meeting, not the 2 other items that the panel will deliberate on in the electronic meeting.
No. Not from me, Chair.
Not from me, Chair.
Not from me, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I just note that the minutes of the previous local planning panel meeting held on the 20th of October 2022, which were endorsed by the chair of that meeting, are submitted for noting. So we now move on to agenda item 3, development applications within the public meeting. So I'll just go back. I'll now invite the 7 people registered to speak to address the panel. We'll start with agenda item 3.1. So Greg Smith, whenever you're ready, Greg. Now you've got up to 15 minutes as the applicant, should you need that amount of time, otherwise however long you need.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible so we can keep moving through the meeting. I'd just firstly like to start by addressing the reasons for refusal, as outlined in the report by Council. The clause 4.6, it states that does not adequately address the provisions of the clause 4.6 to demonstrate that there are sufficient environmental planning grounds to justify contravention to the minimum lot size standard under clause 4.1. Now, going back, a bit of background on Warra Street itself. I've previously been involved and had approved 6 developments in that street, all of similar lot size and similar variations to lot size, all of similar floor space ratio, and all of similar setback variations. Going back through the reports where those town planners have approved those developments, the 4.6 is very similar. So I'm at a loss as to understand why for this particular application, it isn't adequate, where it's been seen as adequate 6 previous times. On the second point, the application is not supported by NATO stamp plans. Our records show that stamped plans were uploaded to the Department of Planning portal on the 16th of June 2022. So I don't understand how a council planner can use this information as a recommended for refusal. It just, I can't understand how they've allowed it to put that there. Point 3, the proposal is not consistent with the R1 zone objective under the GLEP. Again, I draw your attention to the 6 previously approved applications in the street, all varying lot sizes between 724.6 square metres and 730.4, or with a floor space ratio between 0.45 and 0.5 to 1, or with a 6 metre front setback, or with side setbacks of 1.1 metres to 1.2 metres, or with rear setbacks from 2.8 to 3.9. So I'm not saying how this application isn't consistent with the R1 zoning when the previous 6 have been. That question applies for number 4 as well, because it's the same situation. It says it doesn't comply, it doesn't meet the objectives of the DCP, but they haven't outlined how it doesn't when 6 times it's been approved. Point 5, insufficient information has been provided in relation to vehicle access, level of fill across the site and retaining walls. We emailed engineering to the council planner on the 1st of November, not knowing at that stage that we were listed for the 24th of November. Council's planner responded to that email saying, unfortunately, the report was finished and was unable to be amended. I replied to that email saying that council's engineers had requested these directly to the engineer we'd engaged to prepare the plans, and asked her how long she had to have before she had to have the information to the panel. To which she replied, there are several weeks of lead time in the manager peer review, and it is well past the point of me being able to edit my report. You'll be officially advised of the planning panel date. My recommendation is for refusal, noting that LPP are the determining authority. The engineering plans would not change my recommendation. But then she's listed it as a reason for refusal. So I don't understand how she can send an email like that to me and then use it as a point of refusal. Point 6 again, we go back to the clause 4.6. Again, there's been six approved on a similar lot size in the street. 159 West Street also approved, which backs onto number 8 Warra Street. So in the immediate area, one of them approved by the planner that's in question or that's assessing this application.
Sorry, Mr. Smith, I just ask that you remain respectful in relation to the assessment and not direct any personal criticism towards council staff. So just be careful, I think, in just...
Sorry, Chair, it's just really confusing for us as applicants as to how council's planner has come to these decisions when in other instances they haven't been these decisions, and one of which has been made by the planner that has assessed this application. It's not, they're not identically the same, but they're very similar. But we've been, obviously, I don't know if it's because we've got over 10 objections and we've got to go to the planning panel, but there's been no, I suppose, feedback offered to us as to how they're so different from these other ones that have been approved. That's pretty much all I need looked at by the panel, to be honest, is how this application is so different to recommend refusal from the 6 previously approved in the street. 2 18 and 20 Warra Street have both been approved, so directly next door. And yet all we've been told is this one doesn't comply with the zoning, doesn't comply with the objective of the DCP. So that'd be all from me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Just before I open it up to questions from the panel for Mr. Smith, I think I'll just note that some of these questions are probably questions that we will ask of the council officers because your address really directs some of that towards their interpretation or assessment of these matters. but they were matters that were raised in our briefing meeting. The council has provided us with a briefing in relation to some comparative analysis on that point, or not necessarily in terms of the 6 developments. So I think that that's a question that we should be asking the council officers in relation to these 6 developments in the street. But certainly I'd like to probably hear some further information from the council officers on that matter. But also I'll open up, before we do that, I'll just open it up. And again, with the stamp plans, I think we would ask council officers to answer that question. But I'll open it up to the panel to ask you for any clarification or questions on this prior to getting to the council officers.
Yep.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I'll ask, I suppose, the obvious question. Mr. Smith, can you just tell us what numbers in the street, these 6 that you refer to, what are the exact addresses of?
Yeah, sure.
I think you referred to 18 and 20.
Yep.
And I think there's 4 others.
Yeah, there's 19.
Yep.
21.
Yep.
25.
Yep.
And 32.
And all of these 6 are under the 750 square metre minimum, are they?
Yeah, the maximum it would be the same size block as what we've got is 730.4. And they go down to, I'll just go back to my screen. 724.6 is the smallest. Those smaller lot sizes are generally the 19, 21 and 25.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I had, Chair. I did want to know particularly what the 6 were, because Mr. Smith kept referring to it. That's great. Thank you.
And I think that that's good to know which ones they are, and I think we'll hear from council on some of that comparative analysis. Of course, just remind everyone that every application is assessed on its own individual merits. So I think that there's obviously relevance in understanding application of controls and where there might be some similarities, but at the same time, every design is different. So, okay. Any questions, Tony or Greg?
Madam Chair, the only question I was going to ask is that I totally concur that we need to just get clarification from staff, but we've just clarified that they're all below the 750. I'd like to know whether they're all exactly the same types of developments, three-unit, multi-unit housing, as well as, when were they approved? Were they all approved under the current controls? So I welcome staff advice on that.
I can provide that information if you want.
Well, I'm happy to hear from you, Mr. Smith, on that, and then we'll ask that of the staff as well.
Yeah, so the first one that was approved in Warra Street was 32, and that was approved on the 21st of February 2019, with the latest one being approved being 18 Warra Street, so directly next door, being approved on the 21st of January 2022. 19 Warra Street was approved on the 21st of May 2019. 20 Warra Street was approved on the 7th of April 2020. 21 Warra Street was the 5th of November 2021. 25 Warra Street was approved on the 10th of November 2021. And I've got a West Street one there that backs onto Warra Street, but that's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Any further questions, Greg, at this stage?
No, right.
Tony, any from you?
I suppose that the only question is, Greg, is did the same person prepare the 4.6 objections to all of those developments?
Yeah, all 4.6s were prepared by Clark Dowland Associates.
Okay, if there are no further questions of the panel of the speaker, we'll just put some of those questions to council staff. Let's just start with the matter with the comparative analysis and these 6 developments that have been referred to. Who will address us in relation to that? Is that Erin?
Hi, Cara. Yeah. Look, in terms of the 6, I haven't kind of looked at all 6, but I did look at 4 of the 6 that Greg had mentioned in my report. So I think it's on page 33 of the agenda. And I think the difference is the clause 4.6 could be supported if there was a design I was happy with. There's multiple issues on this site, some of which are design, some of which are information. But the 4 that I looked at had greater setbacks than this one. So we're looking at least 3 metre setbacks or at least a varied setback on the rear elevation. This one has a particular issue with the southern kind of rear setback because there's a development that's really tight up against that boundary, so the overshadowing comes into it as well. So, and if you look at the aerial, you can see that particular site's kind of probably in the worst spot compared to others where there's a bit more space. So, I mean, that's really the only way I can address that. There's definitely similarities, but there's also definitely differences, at least across the 4 sites that I've looked at.
Okay, thank you. And do all 4 of those have a similar site area that was reliant on the 4.6?
Yep. They do, yep.
Okay. In relation to the matter on stamped plans, 16th of June, could you just elaborate or provide some clarification on that point?
Yeah, look, I just had a really quick look on the portal. I've got a set of plans with a title and a date in my system, and then I've looked at the same set of plans with the same title and date on the planning portal, and the ones on the planning portal are neither stamped, but I've done a cross-reference and thought, yes, I've got the right set of plans because they've got the same title, revision date, and revision C. So I'm not quite sure what's happened there. So apologies. There's a little bit of double up with the planning portal. Some like getting things emailed to us, but then also uploaded on the portal. And that's not the applicant's fault. That's just kind of us figuring out the best process there. But that has been an oversight.
Okay, so that was submitted then as indicated on the 16th of June. And in terms of the other matter, the level of fills and retaining walls, I think that we've probably understood that there was you sought additional information, they provided it, but it was in your view not wasn't going to change the outcome in relation to the other concerns that you had with the application, and that's why you proceeded to report the matter. That's what I'm just paraphrasing what Greg Smith indicated.
Correct me.
Do you want to add to that, or?
I think that was to do with the sweat paths for the vehicles. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was kind of trying to look things up while listening to that. So yeah, the sweat paths did come in, and there was discussions with the engineers behind the scenes, but by that time I'd already written up my report. And I had said to the applicant, like, hopefully we can use these for any applications moving forward on this site, be it a review or whatever else. But it just wasn't a good use of my time to revise the whole report and take out one reason for refusal. So I just didn't accept those plans. They'd come in like months after they'd been requested, and it was, yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. I've got to kind of made a decision not to accept those plans, and that's all that was. Okay,
I'll just go back to Greg Smith. I mean, you mentioned that the plans, you mentioned something about the level of fill and retaining walls. So is it, are we referring to the same plans?
Well, I haven't been through the engineering when Aaron said they wouldn't be accepted. My understanding was that council's engineers were dealing directly with the designing engineer, and I can only assume that it included all the said retaining walls. There will only be retaining walls needed on the eastern boundary, as number 18 Warrior Street is being developed, and that retaining wall is going in, and there is already a retaining wall along the southern boundary, which was used to retain the West Street development. So the main fill on the site will be in the middle, as the sections and elevations indicate where the natural ground line is, as opposed to where the finished ground line will be. And it does have a bit of a hollow. Number 18 had the same issue. But so the only retaining wall needed to be installed by us would be on the eastern side.
So what date were they, did you submit these plans? Do you happen to know that, or?
Yeah, the 1st of November, they'll email to Aaron.
1st of November. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Does any member of the panel have any further questions or seek any further clarification from either Greg Smith or Erin Murphy in relation to this matter? Yes.
I'd like to just ask Greg a question that clause 4.6 variation attached to this development application identifies 19 dwellings that are 19 similar developments that have been approved with regards to design, scale, height, setback, site cover and parking, etc. But of those 19, there's only one that relates to the 6 you've mentioned today. So is that 19 plus another 5?
Yeah, so there's 4 of these applications that I previously mentioned were approved after the development application was lodged. So obviously couldn't be used in the clause 4.6.
So they've been lodged.
But what I'd ask you to draw your attention to is the 4.6 that was lodged is similar to these 6 that have been approved, where it wasn't questioned that it wasn't informative enough.
So those extra 5 that aren't on the list are approved after your development submission was lodged. Is that what you're saying?
4 of them were.
4 of them were.
Yeah.
So there were 6 approved.
Yeah.
So if you're lodging a submission today, you'd expend that 19 to add another 4 on, would you?
I'd probably I don't think you need more than that.
So on that, I just asked the staff if I could, Madam Chair, about that list.
That's a list of 19 that is referred to in the 4.6.
Yeah, it's just that the argument for the 4.6 is saying recent approvals of multi-unit development with the design, scale, site, etc., have been approved in similar situations, and it lists 19 and talked about another 5 just there. I'd just like to ask the staff, of all those 19 identified in the 4.6, basically similar to this in scale, all of the issues plus lot size, similar types of development, i.e. 3-unit development, and have they been approved recently? If I could just get a quick answer on that, it would be much appreciated.
Sorry, what was the question, Greg?
I'm just saying that there's the 19, which is further to what we just discussed in the 4.6 variation, which is the support for varying the standard. That the council already approved all these other ones with similar design, scale, height, setbacks, and cover, site cover, parking, and they've all been approved under the existing planning controls. So just get some advice.
Not sure I can answer that. I think through the further memo that was received, well, the information that was received, I think we've established that they're not similar. They're not. There's quite a number of them that refer to different types of designs and different types of site areas, smaller site, like similar small site areas, but different orientations and have different amenity impacts. So as much as we can all say they could be similar in some respects, but I think there was only about, although the list is a little bit different, as Greg had also mentioned, that there's some extra ones that we haven't, that wasn't on that 19. So, but the ones that we looked through, that they're not, there's a number there's probably about 3 that are similar style, three units and gun barreled, but even then the design's slightly different again.
Okay, so of that 19, you'd be comfortable with that basically saying 3 rather than 19?
Off that 19 that we looked at, yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Rooney or Grant, have you got any further questions?
No, I don't have any further questions.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your answers. We'll move on then to agenda item 3.2, 78 Bluebell Drive, Wamberal. So we don't have any speakers on behalf of the applicant registered for this item. So we have two speakers that are registered. One is Deborah Bell and one Scott Solar, both against the recommendations. So Deborah, we'll start with you whenever you're ready. You've got 3 minutes. Should you need any extension of that, just let me know and we'll consider that.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Scott Solar, who will be speaking following me on behalf of the concerned neighbours and residents in more detail. I just have a few points that I would like to personally make. So my name is Deborah Bell and I've lived on Bluebell Drive for 40 years. I do love it, and that's why I believe it's important to protect Wamberal Lagoon and its surrounds. So I feel it's worth the effort to balance the development that's going to happen with the conservation of our unique and delicate environment. To me, there's no room for complacency or unfortunate developmental mistakes. How often have we heard, how did council let that happen? We just have to look around, and I'll give the example of Ocean View Drive. Further, building and environmental codes and goals and regulations are carefully set through lengthy consultation and expert collaboration, and this is for very good reason. Approving variations in many cases undermines the integrity of the approval process itself. And with our pristine, fragile natural environment, the Wamberal Lagoon, such variations set unhealthy precedents. Everyone then seems to want higher, bigger. So it has the potential to put our area on a slippery slope of irrecoverable disaster. Once variations are approved, there's no turning back. The regulations and guidelines that I've read through seem to be set to ensure that development is compatible, the height, the bulk, the scale, to the existing and desired future character of the location. Abiding by these rules, etc., takes in the needs of not just the developer, but the neighbours, the communities, and the future generations. The foreshore houses should not be the dominating landscape. The house in question is already 3 stories and one of the largest in the street. So I can't see that there are sufficient reasons to justify contravening the regulations. It should be no to accepting variations as they are unreasonable and irresponsible. So no to promoting 3-storey dwellings on Lagoon foreshore, no to exceeding the building height, blocking views, access to clear space, no to filling the floor space ratio, and no to ignoring the required setbacks, which is on a very narrow street, busy with pedestrians and children, with no footpath, curb and guttering. So that's all I really have to add. And thank you once again to Scott for going into more detail on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I'll just ask the panel members, does anybody have any specific questions of Deborah at this stage?
I hope not.
I don't have any, Madam Chair.
Oh, I don't either. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Chair, I don't.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Scott, we'll move on to your address now. So whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. Hello. Hi, my name's Scott Solar. I'm a resident of Bluebell Drive as well. And as Deb has said, I've been entrusted by our residents and local community members to speak here today regarding the proposed development of 78 Bluebell Drive. Many of my local neighbors were uncomfortable or unsure about attending a meeting, particularly in this digital format. So they do apologize, but yeah, I understand there. So to give a picture of my position within this community, I am a local teacher and my wife is a local medical practitioner. My family and I work regularly with neighbors to organize and run the annual neighborhood gatherings that take place on the grassy area on the corner of Pitt Road in Bluebell, just up from 78 Bluebell. My family and I have regular daily conversations with the community as they walk, run, ride their bike, and walk their dogs up and down our bushy scenic street each morning and afternoon. The reason I'm here today, though, is to speak for my community to say that we object to this amended proposal, that it is not compatible with the current DA building requirements. This application does not comply with the building height, floor space ratio, and front setback regulations. The size of the proposed development does not accord with the locality and streetscape. The development does not protect the views, privacy, and solar access of adjacent properties. The development does not maintain view corridors to coastal foreshore, mainly the Womble Lagoon, and the development does not maintain the scenic and environmental qualities of the Womble Lagoon area. This development application has been submitted on a number of occasions, and in all occasions thus far, responses were given by the developer with intent to show reasonable reasons to why compliancy to the standards are not met. To date, development has been rejected and solid reasoning that this development does not comply with current standards, which are set to protect this area from non-compliancy, which in this case will set a destructive precedent for future developments in this environmentally sensitive location. New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service, March of 1993, published that none on the Central Coast between Sydney and Newcastle remain in natural state, but Womble Lagoon has perhaps the best preserved lagoon and sand dune beach system, despite having a catchment largely modified by the settlements. So those settlements, which include 78 Bluebell, since over 90% of the catchment of Womble Lagoon lies outside the nature reserve, protection of the lagoon depends in particular the cooperation of neighbors and Gosford City Council, which is now Central Coast Council. So I'd like to finish by saying I hope you, the panel and committee and chair, will take into consideration the families, community, and native wildlife who call this area home, and ensure that the non-compliant proposed request be firmly denied, as it does not comply on many levels to the current legislation and standards. That's all I have, but thanks.
No, thank you, Scott. Appreciate your time today. Panel, do you have any questions of Scott?
No, I don't, Chair.
No, Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing from Greg either. Okay. No,
Thanks for your guys' time today. Very much.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes the number of speakers that we have registered on that item. So we'll now move to agenda item 3.3, 34 Warris Street at Long Beach. We have two speakers for the recommendation, and then we have two speakers on behalf of the applicant. So if we start with the first speaker, Debbie Sanatha. Debbie, when you're ready.
Okay, you can hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can I firstly say that I have read the LPP planning report for this DA in relation to non-compliances being addressed and landscaping deficiencies being addressed. At last, thank you. It's good to see these non-compliances being addressed. I'm pleased that the LPP recognised the lack of sufficient side and rear setbacks, as these fail to allow for deep soil, which in turn allows for canopy trees to be planted. If you don't have deep soil, the ability for deep soil, then you're not going to get a true canopy tree. The removal of all vegetation on the site is a typical practice of this company, and the majority of developers, despite the statement of environmental effects, stating that this will not result in any adverse environmental or amenity impacts. As stated in the Gosford DCP chapter 2.1 on character, the aim is to conserve visually prominent trees along back fences, street frontages and verges. Can I please ask if this control is being met? I would like clarification on whether the street tree, which is a cheese tree, Glycidium ferdinandi, is to be retained or removed. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to find that in the report. These trees are one of the Umina coastal sandplain woodland species, which is a threatened ecological community. My concern is that far too often street trees are sited for removal to accommodate the new build. This is concerning because almost every new DA results in the site being cleared of all vegetation. The only remaining vegetation is often the street tree. Developers must not dismiss the value of a tree, the amenity it offers the neighbourhood, and the asset that it is for a healthy environment and the livability of a suburb. In this DA, under landscaping, it suggests that the council tree officer requests that 2 mature street trees are to be planted. It is not clear what species would be planted nor what size pot these would be. Anything less than 100 litres in size is not mature. However, the standard public consent from the Central Coast CEO suggests a 25-litre replacement tree is required. This is inadequate. The best result would be that the street tree remains so that the community does not need to wait 30 years for it to reach the same maturity as the existing cheese tree. Street trees allow walkability of a suburb which is currently threatened by too many tree removals being approved during the DA and the TA process. An example of a street tree being retained is at 22 South Street, Umina Beach, which I understand was a DA certified by Clark and Dowdall. Another example of a street tree being retained is at 32 Coorong Street. This practice aligns with Central Coast Council's Greener Places strategy. Unfortunately, far too often, all vegetation and street trees are removed. I would like to see developers practice tree retention, and this is an opportunity to do this. In this design, around 70% of the site is hard surfaces, which does not allow for sufficient green space. I appeal to the LPP to ensure that the character of leafy gardens is continued in this locality. We cannot retain a leafy gardens character with only soft landscaping. Canopy trees are a must. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, Debbie. Well, does anybody have any questions of Debbie? We will obviously ask at the end of at the conclusion of the speakers on this item for council officers to respond on that aspect of the proposal, should the applicant not be able to answer that question during their address. Any other questions of the panel?
Chair, I just had one question. That was, does Debbie know what species the street tree is that's
yes,
proposed to be removed?
Yeah, its common name is a cheese tree. It's a Glaucidium ferdinandi.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I thought you were talking the cheese tree was at the rear of the site.
I actually don't know what, they haven't labelled any species that are existing. So
right
on the plans, I didn't find that.
Right, okay.
And normally it would be.
Okay. I was just trying to flick through the plans to find reference to it. So I will do that. Thank you for your answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker, Francis Whiffen. Francis, when you're ready.
Hi there. Good afternoon, members of the panel, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. It seems to be quite the coincidence that today there are 2 DAs from the same street on the agenda, Warra Street. Both of them are for gun barrel developments, and both of them have thankfully been recommended by the council for refusal. Perhaps it's not such a coincidence when one looks at the sheer number of examples of multi-dwelling developments in Warra Street. In some ways, Warra Street can be regarded as a preview of what is in store for the rest of the peninsula. A few months ago, some of us at Peninsula Residents Association attempted to document the history of multi-dwelling DAs in Warra Street. Of course, we were limited to what information was available online at the council's e-portal. However, the results were still interesting. Looking at the spreadsheet we produced, the first one was back in 2016 at number 27. That one was only 1 story. The first of the 2-story versions, as far as we can ascertain, was approved on the 1st of February 2019, and that was DA 55443/2018 at 32 Warra Street. That one attracted just 1 submission. However, attached was a petition objecting to the proposal containing 76 signatures. 76. One can only assume that the resident who organised the petition was unaware of the EPA regulations concerning the evaluation of non-unique submissions. Unfortunately, the council assessment of this DA is not available. So what weight, if any, was given to this submission/petition is unknown. What is known is that the DA requested 1 LEP variation and 3 DCP variations. It was approved on the 1st of February 2019. In total, there were 7 approved DAs recorded between 2016 and early 2022 on Warra Street. 6 of them are by the same applicant, Knight Mapleton Design Partners. Of the 7, there are 3 pairs where gun barrels have been built next to each other. They are 19 and 21, 27 and 25, 20 and 18, and the odd one out is number 32. But wait, today we're looking at a DA for number 34. What an interesting series of coincidences. Gun barrel developments seem to infect the street, sort of like cancer. One of them gets built, and then 2 or 3 years later, as if by magic, one appears next door. The neighbour's scarper. One council assessment in relation to multi-dwellings made the statement that multi-dwellings increase property values for other houses in the street. I'm sure that they do, but at what human cost? People having to abandon the house they've lived in, possibly for most of their lives. Another point about the clustering of gun barrels, which I'm sure is not lost on planners, is the sheer mind-numbing waste of land. Each one of these pairs of gun barrels could have shared a driveway. Now we have 6 separate concrete driveways, each one of them, including access across the nature strip, equaling about 200 square metres of concrete. That's 600 square metres of concrete that's completely and utterly unnecessary in practical terms, the equivalent of one entire property.
Mr. Whiffen, would you like a little bit extra time?
Just a little bit, please.
Oh, no
I haven't
problem.
got that much more.
Sure.
Just 2 lines. Thank you. Imagine if developers have their way and the whole of Warra Street becomes separate gun barrels. There are 40 properties in Warra Street. If all of them became separate gun barrels, that will mean a total of 8,000 square metres of concrete driveway. To give you a topical idea of just how much that is, a professional football pitch is 7,140 square metres. The unnecessary concrete, to be half, would therefore cover more than half of a football pitch. Anybody who thinks that this is in any way sane have themselves lost their marbles. Please do not approve this DA. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you for your address. Panel members, do you have any questions of Mr. Whiffen?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you. We don't have any further questions
Thank
at this stage. We'll now move on to the third speaker, Alana Jones, on behalf of the applicant, and we also have Greg Smith on behalf of the applicant. So in total, you have a maximum of 15 minutes. It's up to you how you organise your time and split that time between yourselves. So Alana, if you'd like to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the panel regarding Council's recommendation against our proposed development at 34 Warra Street at Long Beach. I'm the owner of the property, and we've been a bit blindsided here by Council's recommendation to refuse this development. We purchased this land based on the extensive precedents of the same types of development and previous acceptances of the variations required to complete this development. It was designed with similar concepts and character as surrounding developments and other recent approvals. We used the same team who have done these approvals in the hope that they would be successful in getting it through and we can have consistency and congruency in the community. As previously noted in today's meeting, all 6 comparable developments have been approved under the current scheme in the last 2 years. And all of those are on blocks no bigger than our block. Our statement of environmental effects outlines the many precedent approvals and reiterates compatibility with the design. Our multi-unit housing building design would not result in any adverse environmental, amenity, social or economic impacts to the site or surrounding areas. The proposal entails increase in the development density that is suitable for the locality and the land use zoning. The application would be compatible with the intention and the rationale as outlined in the Department of Planning's publication, the Metropolitan Plan 2036, further outlined in the Central Coast Regional Plan. The proposal would be commensurate to building setbacks that have recently been approved, established and permitted. I want to note that despite this taking over 15 months since being lodged in August last year, we strongly now feel that we have not been adequately assessed. This is because the applicant has submitted a final set of documents with all the various changes changes requested by the assessing officer that's been provided. However, it's clear in the report that the various council officers required to look at that have not had a chance to do their review, including the water and sewer and tree officer. I note that the tree officer did request 2 trees which have been included in the final plans. So I can only assume that the tree officer would now support it. But again, this is something we're willing to work with. I note that the engineering is satisfactory subject to conditions. Our revisions at the request of council have not been duly considered or assessed at this point. I'd like to point out that this extensive delay in assessing projects puts very real costs to us in the tune of over $10,000 per month in holding costs on this property. Our expected timeframes have blown out extensively, not only costing us greatly, but now facing the real possibility of being refused. Council's unwillingness to work with developers and council's timeframes are making the area very unattractive to develop within and very hard, despite Central Coast needing a lot more housing in the area. Central Coast Council have shown by multiple precedent approvals their desire to increase the density not only in this street but in the R1 zone on this block size, and that variations have been deemed appropriate previously. We're wanting to help improve the community by constructing new dwellings that council desperately needs. We've also demonstrated numerous precedences where the same variations have been accepted, using the same justification with setbacks, block size and character. And I urge the panel to not refuse our development today. The report identifies that this development is in principle suitable for this site. To directly and briefly address the reasons for refusal, the first one is that the bearing the minimum lot size was not adequate. I can't see how, when every other block in that street has been developed on the same block size with the same rationale, no less than 6 times in the last 2 years. There is also a comment that this variation is minor and is not on its own a reason for refusal. The reason too is in regards to our plans not being NAICS stamped, and this is actually inaccurate as they have been provided as noted in a report on the 26th of October. And it says that the council have verified and failed to verify their compliance due to the timeframes and then therefore deemed them non-compliant despite us having the NAICS stamp. And I think that this is unreasonable and that our most recent certificate should be given consideration and assessment. I also note that the other developments at 18, 20 and 25 of the same type were approved without NAICS stamped plans, indicating that council does not necessarily require this before granting consent. As such, this request is in itself unnecessary. The reason 3 is that it is not consistent with the R1 objectives. This is regarding character and best practice designs and is largely discretionary. I want to highlight that similar designs have been approved on numerous occasions. The precedence is more than telling of rather than a discretionary taste, and demonstrates that we are consistent with what is happening in the R1 zone currently by following the path that has been shown as acceptable. The comments throughout the report do say that a development like this is in principle justified and acceptable within the R1 zoning. The scenic quality and character. I believe that the inconsistencies have been justified and substantiated with similar evidence that has previously been deemed acceptable. They're all in line with other approvals and developments. The current area incorporates a variety of mixed roof designs. The Skillion design is becoming more popular within the community and therefore seems to cover both current and future desired character. I note that similar Skillion roof designs have either been approved, built or currently exist at 19, 20, 21 and 25 Warra Street. The planner's comments say that a medium density residential development is appropriate in principle on this property. The applicant believes that the proposal does improve living standards for multiple families by increasing the density on this spot, and it has been flagged as the area where this is appropriate by being in the R1 zone. Unfortunately, being surrounded by less developed places, it is the next place to develop in the coast, and that is where density is going to increase. Reason 5 is insufficient information that has been provided. The same information has been provided that has in the past been very acceptable to council to get those others through. So I'll let our planner address that more directly, but if I don't understand how this is no longer acceptable. And reason 6 is inconsistent with the current and future desired character and not in the public interest. I believe the desired character is discretionary as we've discussed above, but it is well within the public interest. I fail to see how it is not in the public interest, and the report does not appear to adequately address this concern. If anything, the report justifies that it is well within public interest. The report contains the following planner comments. Traffic, the existing road network has the capacity to accommodate the additional density. Natural environment, no threatened species of habitation. Economic and social impact, it says in two separate parts of the report that our development will contribute to the necessary supply of housing needs and that no unreasonable social impacts will arise from the proposed development. Suitability, no environmental hazards are around, and the zoning is for residential purpose, which is suitable for what we are doing. I can't actually see any explanation or reason as to how it is not in the public interest. In summary, I hope that the panel does give due consideration to truly reviewing this unreasonable recommendation and grant us approval of this development. The development is consistent with what is currently happening all around the street and the area. If there is something outstanding or needed, I urge you to allow us to rectify before a decision is made if you don't have enough to approve today. I'll hand over to Greg now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. We'll continue with Greg and then we'll come to questions.
Thanks, Alana. Okay, I'll try and be a bit short and sweet. Alana's covered most of those points in the report, as far and which are similar to 16 Morris Street. I will just cover point 5 with the insufficient information provided in relation to council sewer mains. This one really stumped me because this has never been discussed between myself and the planner through the whole process, the whole application process. Council sewer main is located on the Warra Street side of the property, so the north, and will be approximately 3.9 metres away from Unit 1, so the closest unit to Warra Street, with the sewer manhole being located in 32 Warra Street's driveway. I will note, though, that the development engineer supports the supports the application subject to conditions, which is a general approval process. Once the development application is approved, a condition is we lodge a 305 to receive a 306 letter, which is then where we address the zone of influence or building over or adjacent to council sewers. So I'm not understanding, again, why council has that in there as a reason to refuse. It hasn't been discussed. So there's some clarification on that would be good. Alana's gone through pretty thoroughly the other points. Just a few questions for council from the report. Page 246, the planner has listed Unit 1 as a 3 or 4 bedroom unit, but it's clearly a 3-bedroom unit and always has been, so I'm not sure how that happens. I'm just going through the list. The planner also says on page 255 that there's no natural ground level shown on the plans, and that it's an estimated 8.3 metre height, but the natural ground level is shown on all elevations and section. One of the objections apparently mentioned how many bedrooms. It says it has 4 bedrooms. I don't know how an objector would know what the floor plans are. They're not supposed to see the floor plans due to privacy reasons. And just page 275 in the report, where it says the landscape and site plan haven't been to water and sewer or council's tree officers. They were lodged with council on the 25th of August 2022. Now, council seemed to use the excuse that they weren't stamped with a NATERS stamp until October, but the site plan and landscape plan don't need to be stamped with a NATERS plan. So I don't understand why council couldn't have submitted those to council's engineering and tree services to get the reports finalised. So I just saw those questions answered by council, and again, the precedence needs to be looked at. In relation to the objectives and the other talkers, unfortunately, yeah, the cheese tree would have to come down. That's more a council thing as well as a developer's thing. It's not the size of the development. It's effectively where the curb and gutter is going to go. So it just wouldn't be able to stay there. So that could be a two-unit development, the same as on number 30, or a 6-unit development, and the curb and gutter is still going to go in the same spot. So it would have to come down. As far as overdeveloping, which the second speaker touched on, the new LEP has actually abolished the minimum lot size to put units on. So it's something council clearly wants is more units. The same as you can now do dual occupancies on R2 land. So just to address those two points that came up. That's all.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Greg, for your address there. I'll just, before we get to, I think a few of those questions again we'll ask council to provide some answers to. But before we get to that, I might open it up to panel members to ask specific questions of Lana and Greg.
I don't have any questions, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, if I can just ask Greg Smith a question about the last point you touched on. So Greg, so what you're saying, as I understand it, is under the new Central Coast LEP, there is no minimum lot size for these sorts of developments. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do they have a floor space ratio control or anything like that?
Yes, they will.
Oh, okay.
And I believe it is still 0.5. I haven't done a multi-unit development under the new LEP yet, so I haven't gone too deep. But I believe it's 2.5.
Right. And what about the height standards are the same, is it?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had about that.
Setbacks are actually more relaxed than the new one.
Is that so? The setbacks are in the DCP?
Yeah.
Right.
So we only require a 900 side setback now.
Okay. So I have to ask a question. Then, if this application is to be refused and you to re-lodge it, are you saying then that you're more compliant than you currently are?
Well, no, because we'd be uncompliant in other areas. The new DCP states that it does not want a courtyard within the 6 metre space, 6 metre setback space.
Okay.
So yeah, and the rear setback is more relaxed, but it is still more than we have. It's 4.5 metres under the new DCP rather than the current 6 under the old DCP.
Okay, thank you.
Greg, do you have any questions of Alana or Greg?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, well, we might just ask some questions of council officers then. I'll just start from the top, and if anybody wants to jump in, let's feel free. I think we've just heard from Greg Smith in relation to the matter raised by Debbie around the street tree, and he's confirmed that they're not proposing to retain it. So I think that has clarified that question. I don't know that there's any specific questions. I mean, Francis provided a lot of background information, which was very helpful. I'm not sure that there was a specific question in there for that we will be asking council officers that isn't already covered in the assessment report. I do note there was a matter to do with property values. That's not an assessment criteria under the Planning Act, or for us to make a decision on whether it has an impact on property values or not. It's not a matter for consideration in the planning assessment. In terms of from Alana, let's have a look. Obviously, we talked about the lot size again, which we obtained some clarification from council officers on, which I assume is the same information that we talked about with the other application in Morris Street. So the 19 referred to in the clause 4.6 variation, the 6 subsequent approvals that have occurred since the application, I think, was lodged. Now, going to the point about the plans not being stamped and being therefore failed to verify their timeframes, can the Susanna, I think it is the council officer on this one, can you provide some clarity on that matter?
Okay, generally speaking, in terms of my specific development assessment, the plans, we did work a lot through with Greg trying to get some of the specific items sort of in a fashion that they would be supportable, because from day one I did mention that due to the scale and the accumulated effects of all the non-compliances were detrimental to the development assessment. So I did try and work with him quite consistently in trying to get it to a better stage. Now, the final, we did go through back and forth several times. So the last set of plans he sent through to me were on the 28th of August. And I guess one of the other big issues that I had in terms of the clause 4.6 and why it wasn't acceptable was that they not only requiring the site variation, but also an FSR. So that's where we did a lot of work in the sense of trying to bring down the FSR, which he did finally, but just barely. So that would have had to be included in the clause 4.6. And basically that's why it wasn't acceptable. In terms of that, again, the last set of plans he sent through were the 28th of August, but they were not stamped. I did request twice for him to send me a set of plans with stamped basics. And why it's important to have the basic stamped plans is because in terms of multi-dwelling units, they need to comply not only as unique units or dwellings for themselves, but also a combination of all three. And they have to demonstrate that sustainably they have a star rating over a certain amount. And if we don't have that, that's basically why you can't really say that they do comply. And the stamp plans he sent through for the last amended plans were sent on the 26th of October, which was a day before I had already submitted my report to the panel for revision for peer review. So that's basically I guess a little bit of the history in terms of the clause 4.6 in regards also to the stamp basics plans as to why it wasn't accepted. I also wanted to, I guess, address Greg's comments in regards to clarification of coordination of plans. This is very important because throughout the different, I guess, back and forths, revisions aren't and dates are not generally changed. And I am quite sort of strict in the fact that they have to give me a final set of architecturals, engineering, landscape plans, and as a minimum of the statement of environmental effects to all be coordinated throughout with the new amended plans. And that hasn't been done. And it does get lost with, they change this, they change that, and it's not reflected here and it's not reflected there. The statement of environmental effects does refer to 4 bedrooms and the plans do show only 3 bedrooms. I consistently asked for an updated and, statement of environmental effects, which I never got. And the one that we're sort of used for the assessment was the original one. In terms, again, also of, what was the other? Oh, in terms of the additional 6, I think, DAs that he's mentioned, I would just like to bring to the attention of the panel that, as we've said, in respects to merit-based design, all of those that are odd numbers are completely not applicable in this case because, for starters, they're orientated and they're on the opposite side of the street. So in terms of site planning, in terms of the way the orientation of the floor plans and everything are totally different to those on the northern, which are facing the northern side. So this is why it's important not to basically just say, oh, this one's been approved, that one's been approved. Each one is very different. And so we've got at least 3 or 4 of those DAs he's mentioned that are not applicable because they are with a different site orientation. In terms, I did look closely to number 32, which was the one that was mentioned. And I can say the clause 4.6 should have used that one as maybe a proper analysis for their clause 4.6. But in general, I can say it's the clause 4.6 is very generic and it doesn't really address in detail why they're not compliant. It's important to also remember that all of these I guess, variations or why we have the DCP and the LEP, the planning instruments, these are the minimum stated requirements. You know, this is the minimum that we're supposed to be accepting, and this development application is not compliant with setbacks, with articulation, with deep soil, with solar access. Solar access is very important. 2 of those dwellings will not have sun in winter for sure, and most probably I'd say 90% in summer. And part of that, as I explained to the panel previously, is because of the DA that was approved on number 32, that will, any little bit of sun that the new application or the proposed application could have, it would be taken away because of the extended sun diagrams that the one that has been built on 32 will provide onto the other site. So in terms of site planning, it's really important that they've got the separation. Merit base is really when we can see that, okay, you might be a little bit over this or a little bit over that, but you are getting amenity, you are getting decent private open space, you are getting the sunlight, that's the minimum requirement, and you are getting, you know, overall, you know, amenity for those who will be living there, as also for the neighbouring properties. So I'd like to really stress on that these are the minimum and they're not even reaching the minimum requirements. I think that was really about it. I don't know if there was anything else that I may have missed.
Well, if we just go back to no, thank you for that detailed response. Going back to the matter of the plans being stamped, and I think both Greg and Alana have talked about submission of different plans. With regard, and there's been obviously language used in terms of plans not being accepted. So could you just clarify for the panel, the plans that have been assessed and that the panel has before it, are they, other than the stamp or looking at the stamp in terms of the basics requirements, is there any new material that the applicant has submitted in amended plans that do not form the basis of the assessment before the panel today?
For the stamped ones that he provided on the 26th of October, in general, no. They would be pretty much, that would be the latest. But that set of plans he just sent through, I didn't receive any further information. I didn't receive the updated statement of environmental effects or any other item that would have had to be updated. Sometimes reports refer and install the or have inserted the plans themselves. On this occasion, that hasn't been done. So it's really a matter of just the last plans and then just the original documentation.
So those plans from the what was the date of the last set of plans?
The last set of plans with BASIC stamps was sent through on the 26th of October of 2022.
26 when were they submitted through the portal?
Yes, they were. And also I also worked with Greg and I asked him not to have any issues to send a copy through email for myself.
Okay. And do they form the basis of the assessment report upon which we've got, are they the plans before us today?
No, because I didn't get a chance to take a look at them. I based my assessment on the ones that were handed in on the 28th of August of 2022.
Right, okay. So that your plans are the 28th of August.
That's correct. And generally, once he's provided all the update information as a package, that gets sent through again to the all the other officers that were looking. In this case, it would have been tree officer and also water and sewer. Water and sewer item isn't a big issue, but it is something that had to be looked at. That could be finally conditioned or catered for. It's just a matter of making sure that they're not over. And again, it goes back. And I think the issue is the quality of the plans that they give out in terms of drawing and also annotation, because the water and sewer engineer was not able to determine whether he had a wall, if it was a fence or what it was, because it's not delineated and it's not shown properly. So it could be that if it's only just a fence, there's no need to, but we need the final design with the street, I guess, the way they're going to finally address the streetscape for them to actually look at it. So this is why it's really important to have a good quality of plans and annotations on those plans, and that everything is coordinated throughout the whole documentation.
I understand what you're saying, and I know that it's not just about a set of plans, it's actually about the coordinated information if plans have been correct. It's about having an SEE and a clause 4.6 that relates to the plans that are before the assessment. But I would like to provide the opportunity now for Greg Smith and Alana Jones to have perhaps clarify or summarise any of those key changes that they have made in those plans. And I think that that's something that the panel is going to have to consider, the fact that the plans, this assessment report that we have before us is based on plans submitted in August, not plans submitted just under a month ago. So I think we'd really like to understand, whether the changes have been minor, whether there are some significant changes in there that might otherwise have changed the outcome of the assessment. So if I just provide that opportunity for Alana and Greg to articulate what perhaps some of the key changes in those plans between August and October are.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll jump in there. The plans that are dated as issue C in 25th of August are the final plans. They were emailed for feedback from Susanna before being sent off to get assessed by our thermal assessor. That's not done in-house. So that is where the delay in time is from Susanna saying, yeah, that's fine, sending them off, getting them done, and then sending them into Susanna. So they are the exact same set of plans. The ones that were emailed to Susanna in August are not stamped.
Okay.
The ones that went through in October are the same plans, just got the NATO stamp.
Okay, so they just weren't stamped, but they have exactly the same design, which means that the statement of environmental effects in the clause 4.6, you didn't amend that because they're the same information. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If barring the discrepancy in the floor space ratio, where I've worked with Susanna we decreased unit 3 slightly and unit 1 slightly on the first floor. Mm-hmm. The design hasn't changed, and this is why I don't understand with water and sewer, because it also means Scarborough and Associates engineers' plans haven't changed. The pits are in the same spot. Everything like that has not changed through the whole design.
Okay, so I just want to get to that point because you mentioned when you're talking about the sewer main that the engineer's referrals supported the application subject to conditions. And then, Susanna, you just mentioned that obviously a further referral of the stamp plans hadn't gone through the engineers, but the engineers had some concerns. So could Susanna, could you just clarify that?
Yes, we have two set of engineers. One is for the development assessment itself, and the other is water and sewer, who look at the connections and what's out on the street. So it's water and sewer, the ones that originally were not supportive of the DA because it looked like there was a fence wall that was on there.
Right. So there.
Then there was amended plans, and those amended plans are now showing just a metal fence. So without establishing that, again, metal fence is quite easy to, take down in case they needed to do something, or if it is within the 1 meter of the, sewer lines or within the area of the sewer line. Not the same with walls. So that's why I'm saying it's not really a major, but we did need final, I guess, plans to be able to resend back to the assessing officers.
So, Susanna, sorry, just to jump in there, what plans got amended fences?
Your last ones, it looked at the beginning, you had like a wall on there, your original plans are out in the streetscape, and now it's just like a metal fence, like just a fencing with no wall underneath it.
Are we talking about the landscape plan, Susanna?
Well, that's, you should be telling me, because basically, again, landscape plan. Can I finish, please?
Yeah.
The landscape plans with the with your site plans or the rest of the plans sometimes also are different. You show. I think if you may look, I'm not sure if it's in this DA. It may be that you show a fence, but then on the perspective, it's just a metal, tubular fencing. So again, we go back to the coordination of plans and what the DA is really showing.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the confusing part for me is that I haven't changed any of the fencing on the original submitted plans. The front courtyard fence is the same as to what the last plans were.
Sorry, it's each of you needs to address the panel rather than each other.
Sorry.
But so we're obviously asking the questions because there seems to be some confusion, and it's really to clarify to the panel what the situation is in relation to which plans and what referrals. But I think we've got enough information now in relation to where that matter is up to. Can we just now cross over to the other matter that's come up from, it's been raised by actually everyone, but in terms of, scenic quality, character, and I know there's obviously different addresses in relation to this, and it probably goes to the matter of the planning controls, obviously, that are in place, and upon which each application is assessed, which is obviously on their merits. But in terms of, I guess, it'd be good to hear from council officers just with regard to this matter of desired future character, and also in relation, I guess, to some of the information that Francis Whiffen was putting forward in terms of some of the other applications, and I guess the matters behind that with regard to character. But a strategy, I'd just like to know in terms of I know we know that the controls have changed, but this application is still being considered under the savings provisions. But council, where is council currently undertaking any kind of strategic planning review, of this area in terms of like what do the objectives and some of the new controls, for instance, indicate in terms of a desired future character? Because we're hearing different concerns or outcomes, both from local residents and also from the applicant.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You go, Susanna, first, and I'll.
I was just briefly going to touch on the fact that on our report we do do a sort of a not a detailed, I guess, assessment, but we do refer to an assessment under the Central Coast Development Control Plan, where we have put a summary of how it would stand the same development with the new controls that are coming in. And again, we do find that lots of the, although it's now based more on I guess, building stock and bulk and the new, I guess, setbacks and everything. That's the setbacks are what are going to determine, I guess, or the building envelope in terms of what the density or what can happen within the site. I think that's the main difference. But in terms, I can read for my development application, the FSR maintains it's still going to be the same. In terms of height, it still remains the same, 8.5 and 2 stories. The site coverage will roughly be similar, which is 25% of soft landscaping, and the development application, or what is proposed, has currently 19.8%. The private open spaces are pretty much similar, and again, it will be seeking variation similarly to what is the assessment now. The front setbacks, as I've said, are different, but they will be more prominent in terms of determining, the density or what can be done within the site. The reset back again is 4.5, and the private space in terms of sunlight will also be the same, of having 50% of the principal private open space and also sunlight into the dwellings themselves will be exactly the same for everything. So the variations will be exactly the same on this development.
Elsa, did you want to add any further?
Sorry, putting myself off mute and everything. Everything got brought over to we're still basing it on the character statements that were in the previous, from the previous DCP. There isn't currently any. I think we've got a shortage of, unfortunately, strategic staff as well. So I had to update all that. I think it is something that's going to be looked at in the future, but at the current time, we don't have anything that I know of in plan to look into that at the moment. So we haven't got any change to the character statements that we've got currently.
Okay, so in terms of, and obviously we heard that, and it's in our assessment report, we didn't just hear it today, that there are some changes obviously in the new controls with respect to not having a minimum lot size, etc. There's no change to permissibility though, is there? That's in the new controls. You'd still able to have dual occupancies, multi-dwelling housing.
That is correct, yes.
Is there any, it sounds like there's a lot of similarities, but probably when you think about character, you're thinking about obviously also any changes to some of those fundamental controls in terms of lot size, height, FSR, but also in terms of, in particular, open space, landscaped area requirements, deep soil, site cover, and also whether there are any changes to the definitions of those things. And I guess I'm probably keen to understand in site coverage, for instance, and we can see that both these proposals and other proposals in the street do cover a lot of the site. that in terms of either building or driveways. Is there any change? Has there been any change to the definition of site cover, for instance, to enable more deep soil planting or landscape or private open space to be provided at ground level for multi-dwelling housing, or is that all exactly the same?
Cara, I might jump in. Oh, sorry, Suzanne. Do you want to?
No, you go, Erin. That's fine.
I was going to say, Susanna and I have actually looked at this issue just in the last few weeks. They basically the DCP controls in the new controls in the Central Coast do have slightly different setback controls, private open space controls. They're similar, but I would say the setbacks are a little bit more relaxed. However, that obviously has to be read in combination with the private open space, deep soil, etc. control. So while there is an allowance that at some points there'll be a 900 mil setback on a side boundary, you can't do a full side boundary of 900 mil because you just simply won't meet some of the other controls which talk about private open space, deep soil, etc. Now, there is a new, a new heading in the DCP that talks about site coverage, and there is a definition of site coverage, but then when you actually look at the control, it talks about soft landscaping and deep soil. So it does define site coverage, but then it actually, the control focuses on the amount of soft landscaping and deep soil, and it's 25% of the site. And so that's obviously doesn't include driveways and basically any hard stand areas. So Susanna and I kind of going through that and how that's going to apply going forward as well. So there certainly is controls to kind of drive better development for these sorts of things, and it's just now really our job to apply them a little bit more strictly than perhaps we had been under the old DCP.
Yeah, okay, I think that's helpful, Erin, and I think just for the benefit of the public meeting, we're obviously just asking some questions and clarifications in relation to this because they are matters that have come up from a number of speakers, but also while these applications have been assessed and are to be determined under the basis of the provisions that were in place at the time the applications were lodged, the new controls are more than imminent and certain because they're around. So they are still relevant matters of consideration in the assessment of the application. So they are given weight and substantive weight in relation to these applications. Did any of the other panel members wish to ask any further questions or clarification of any of the speakers? Or
Madam Chair, there was just the issue about I think Alana Jones raised it about the skillion roof design of this proposal, I think, and the note I've got is I may be misquoting it, but I thought she said numbers 19, 20 and 21 Warra Street had a skillion roof design. Are the council officers able to clarify whether that's the case or not?
I haven't looked at the other ones, but in terms of skillion roofs, per my planning report, they are a good modern design, but I guess the effect of the skillion roof itself is to allow sunlight and natural airflow at a higher level, and for that you would need to have obviously higher level windows, but it's been negated at this stage because he's closed up he's closed up with a ceiling in there. So it's not being used in terms of what the architectural sort of component should be. So he's used it just as a roof, but not really in the terms of what it could be. He could have used better maybe as I've put in the report, gable roofs, which would have given them a lower ridge level, and maybe he could have worked better the overall longitudinal facade, which unfortunately for the west side exasperates. He's actually using almost 1.1 metre additional unnecessary additional height with the skillion roof, because he's not using, you know, the I guess the fundamentals of the skillion roof characteristics. So it really doesn't, it's just exasperating the height by, you know, 1 to 1.5 meters.
Right. So the difficulty here isn't with the skillion roof design as a general concept. It's the way that it's been applied to the particular design of this development.
That is correct. That is correct. I mean, it could have been if he was trying to capture sunlight at a higher level. So basically, for example, that he's having more sunlight into his sitting area or a bedroom or a hall that's overlooking into the underneath living area, it would be perfect. You know, it would be great because he's actually capturing that sunlight that otherwise wouldn't be there. Or even, you know, extra ventilation, but it's been closed in. If you look at the section on page 260 of the report, he's closed it in with a ceiling. So there's nothing in there except accumulating more heat, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's not
it should have been opened, and I could have accepted that, for example, on that section, bedroom 3, could have been maybe not 2.7, it could have been maybe 2.4, and then the skillion roof could have started and, you know, have provided something else. So there's a mismatch there in terms of architectural language and what you can really do, I guess, with what you're sort of proposing.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
I guess this just goes back again to the points that we were just talking about in terms of having locality specific provisions or local character statements. In the new DCP, and perhaps Elsa can answer this. Is there a specific locality? Is there a locality specific provision for this area or for precincts within different suburbs that might again things like the, you know, skillion roofs and what type of features are appropriate and not appropriate?
There's the same character statements. They're not getting updated yet, so we've gone back to what old 2013 ones. So we're probably a bit behind on the times of what's happening on the street as such. I mean, we're not still. We know that in that area there is various types of designs, and we're aware that many things of differing quality have been approved, etc. But I think in these examples, and I think there is the impacts, the cumulative impacts that have happened over these type of designs, and we're not saying that previous things haven't been approved, but I think we've shown that there's been different circumstances. Maybe there's one or two that are similar, but nothing's ever similar. I suppose the impacts are never exactly similar. What's happened next door is never similar to what's on each different one. I think we don't want to redesign anybody's either. So I think Susanna's like, we're not going to tell the person that they should have something either, but it's just looking at the impacts. And then also in these examples, is it just the information, whether it was submitted close to when we're meant to be submitting it to the local planning panel, but we also have pressure from the local planning panel to put applications up as well. So both of these have been going for a while, but we've been trying to be supportive. But it comes to a point that we have to we can't keep just taking information in and keep assessing, because it'll just never get to a panel. It is that kind of history of that.
No, I think thank you for that response. Okay, I think that, and are there any final questions or of the speakers in the panel?
I don't have any, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I don't have any.
Well, I'd really like to just before I close the meeting, I would like to thank all the speakers on these items today, and in particular the extensive discussion that we've had both with the applicants and the community speakers in relation to the ones in Morris Street in particular, and obviously in terms of Bluebell. So I thank people for their time. I know it has gone a little bit over what we would normally expect, but there are a lot of matters that were raised from different perspectives, and I think it was good for some clarification to be provided to the panel in relation to that. So thank you. I will now formally like to close this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel, and to thank all those who attended and took part, including my fellow panel members, members of the communities, representatives of the applicants and council staff. And the panel will now adjourn to deliberate on those 3 matters and an additional 2 electronic meetings that didn't trigger coming to a planning panel. Now it's 3:40. So if I could just suggest that the panel takes a short 15-minute tea break, and that we resume at 3:55 in the separate determination link. Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.